Assalamualaikum and hi everyone. So we are in lecture 5 Systems Thinking Tools part 1. In this video we are going to cover systems thinking tools and two basic tools which are feedback and stock and flows. There are three types of tools in system thinking. The first one is the basic tool which include the feedback, diagram and stock and flows. The second one is structural thinking, including graphical function diagram, structure behavior pair, and also policy structure diagram. And the third tool is the dynamic thinking, which involve the behavior over time graph, the causal loop diagram, and also systems archetypes. So for our lecture, we are going to cover for basic and also the dynamic thinking. So let's look at the first one. Feedback acts as a control to a system. There are two types of feedback, which is the positive feedback and also the negative feedback. So a positive feedback tends to increase the final result or the output, while the negative feedback tends to reduce the output. Alright, so one example of positive feedback mechanism would be in terms of blood clotting. Okay, when you bleed, what will happen to your body? So the platelet will be produced. So more bleeding would produce more platelet to cover the cut. Okay, so A produce more B, which will produce more A. So that's the positive feedback mechanism. So another example for negative feedback mechanism would be the glucose control by insulin. So if the blood sugar level is high, so the receptor in your body will sense the changes. So what will happen is that the pancreas will secrete the insulin into the blood in order to lower the blood sugar level. Alright, so once the blood sugar level reach the homeostasis, pancreas will stop releasing the insulin. So when we say positive or negative feedback, it is not a good or bad thing, but it is to show the movement and also the final output that is being produced. Feedback is the signal that is looped back to control a system within itself. So the loop produced is called as the feedback loop. There are two types of feedback loop. The first one is reinforcing loop and the second one is balancing loop. Reinforcing loop generate exponential growth or collapse. So it can be constructive or destructive. So whatever movement occurs is amplified, producing more movement in the same direction movement is amplified. Let's say you have variable A and variable B. These two variable changes in the same direction. Okay, either increase or decrease. So it is denoted as S or plus symbol. Balancing loop underlie all goal-oriented behavior. So in any balancing or stabilizing process, there is self-correction to maintain some goal or target. So variable A and variable B changes in the opposite direction, which is marked by O or minus symbol. Now let's move on to stock and flow. Stock and flow represent interdependencies and feedback within a system by identifying major accumulations and the factors which increase and decrease them over time. So stocks and flows represent by stock, flow, auxiliary or converter, and source and sink. Stock or level is the accumulation of stuff that change over time through the action of flow. For example, like water in bathtub, cash, anger, hunger, trust, or even population. So it is represented by nouns and rectangular in shape. So flow or rate is the actions or processes that increase and decrease accumulation. So it is directly aiding to inflow or taking away from outflow, which is the accumulation in the stock. For example, the rate of water flowing out of a bathtub, birth, death, spending, saving, and it is being represented by verbs and drawn in the shape of hourglass. Auxiliary or converter is the additional parts in the stock and flow. It holds the information about the system that affect the rate of the flows. For example, like allowances affects the rate of dollars added per month. So auxiliary is being drawn in the shape of an oval. Source represents systems of levels and rates outside the boundary of the model, while sink is where flows terminate outside the system. So these two placed at the start and the end of the model, and it looks like a cloud. Stock and flow use the bathtub analogy. So stock is like the water in a bathtub, the level of which can change over time. And then we have inflow, represent water being added through a faucet. And we have outflow, represents the water flowing out through a drain. And then we have auxiliary, determine how quickly the water flows in or out. So using the bathtub analogy, we can represent the situation using the stock and flow diagram. So it will look like this. So let's take a look at one example. Joe is a student in a local university, so he received allowance from his father every week. These allowances were kept in Joe's saving account. Joe used his allowance from the account for his weekly expenses. So now, based on the situation, show the stock, inflow, outflow, auxiliary, source, and sink. Based on the situation, we need to identify our component for the stock and flow diagram. So the first one is the stock, which is the Joe's savings. So we drew it like this and label it with Joe's savings. And then we have the inflow, which is dollars added per week. So dollars added per week comes into the Joe's saving. And then we have the outflow, which is dollars spent per week. Right, so it goes out from Joe's savings. And then we have auxiliary, which is the allowance quantity, right? And then we draw the source, which is the allowance, and the sink, which is dollars spent. So you get the whole stock and flow diagram. So this is another example that we have, so please look through this. So based on that, we will get this kind of stock and flow diagram. So we have covered basic tools, which is feedback and stock and flows diagram.